The use of information and communication technologies have increased throughout the world, particularly after the advent of the internet. Statistics show that most people living in the developed economies have access to ICTs in one form or another. But this is not the case for people living in developing economies. Some of the questions we'll explore in this episode are: how can these countries, especially in the Western Balkans and the Eastern Partnership regions, take advantage of the opportunities generated by ICTs? And how can the vulnerable groups in these countries benefit from ICTs? So to the viewers and listeners out there, welcome back to Inclusive Blog powered by RECONOMY. This is episode 24. My name is Sabin, and we'll have a special conversation with three experts. Nandini Harihareswara, who is a digital finance and payments expert focused on ensuring the benefits of the digital economy are inclusive of those underserved in emerging markets. Nandini, thank you for being part of this episode.
Thank you for inviting me.
We have Sona Teluns, who is a programs director at the Center for Agribusiness and Rural Development in Armenia. Sona, thank you for joining.
Thanks to you too. Thanks for the invitation.
And Asif Zakir, who is a manager of the social enterprise Radio Recycling in North Macedonia. Asif, thank you for being part of the podcast once again.
My pleasure to be part of the group, Sabin. Thank you for the invitation.
We had an interesting conversation with you, Asif, on how location matters in accessing and using economic opportunities. So to the viewers and listeners out there who are interested to watch or listen, go to episode 20 on the RECONOMY website. Nandini, I'd like to start with you. ICTs represent the fastest and deepest technological change experienced in international development. Can you kind of walk us through the impact ICTs or digital technologies are having on development? Which sectors in development are being impacted?
So ICT, stands for Information Communication Technology. At its most basic level, while there's an array of technologies that are relevant within ICT or digital or whatever we choose to call it, it's really the phone and the internet that are the two most transformative technologies that have changed the lives of traditionally marginalized people in the world and traditionally low-income people in the world. And for that is because the $5 feature phone, or some people call it the dumb phone, and the $20 smartphone, and you can find a $20 smartphone in a lot of countries now, are giving access to not just calls and texts, which are actually transformative in and of themselves, right? Being able to reach out and talk to someone for a price you can afford is actually hugely transformative if you didn't have that before. But in addition to that, it's enabled a suite of services that just previously weren't financially viable as businesses, right? If we're thinking about long-term sustainable improvement of the quality of people's lives, they have to contain business models that are sustainable. So having that phone and having access to internet in someone's hands, and every person's hands, or not everyone, which we'll talk about later, it is a game changer, right? And so these are cross-cutting tools that have changed the cost of reaching customers in almost every sector, right? The ones I can kind of very briefly touch on, because I don't want to go on forever on this, are financial services, of course, agriculture, which is incredibly important for every country, energy and health being just a few of them, right? And so, one example, financial services, an area that I know very well, right? The World Bank has a tool called the Findex. And the Findex measures many things. It's an amazing nationally representative tool in hundreds of countries. But it's been measuring access to financial accounts since 2011. And for the first time in a decade, and it just came out this year, it comes out every 3 or 4 years, the gap between men and women's access to financial accounts has dropped for the first time. It's been maintained at 9% for a decade. Finally, it's dropped to 6%. This is largely because of the phone and the advent of mobile money and digital financial services that have taken access to financial services out of, sometimes it's a bit intimidating for some people to go to a bank, right? And so for a long time, a bank has been out of reach, or a bank account or a financial account has been out of reach. But if it's about something that you already have, if it's about talking to someone that's in your local market, that's something that's much more accessible to people, right? So it's really to put financial services in the palm of someone's hand, right? Access to energy. Previously, you had to be on the grid, right? Right now, I'm on the grid. I pay an energy bill. But many people do not live in areas that have access to energy grids. The advent of the mobile phone, digital financial services, and pay-as-you-go energy have allowed millions of people in Africa and Asia to have access to solar energy on a pay-as-you-go basis, right? If they can pay, they have energy and it's a rent-to-own basis. So they kind of make their payments. They have access to energy, and after making a certain number of payments, they own the device. So then they don't have to make payments anymore, right? It's these kinds of business models. It's also called sachet financing that are enabled by ICTs that are significantly improving the quality of life for marginalized people and low-income people around the world. I'll stop there.
Nandini, thank you very much for providing this overview of the impact of the ICTs are having on development. And in the frames of the regional program RECONOMY, Sona, your organization as a co-implementing partner to Helvetus has begun just recently to work on improving the agriculture sector in Armenia in order to have a profitable and sustainable food production. Can you kind of walk us through what are you up to?
Yes, sure. Before that, I would like to add a couple of words to Nandini's speech, which was really very comprehensive and very correct, also in case of Armenia, as these technologies are also emerging in Armenia, and IT sector is blooming currently, and it tightly cooperates with agriculture, making many useful applications, mostly, in our case, mostly to enhance sales of agricultural products. Which is something new for Armenian farmers. You might not know, but Armenia has very fragmented agricultural production with average land lot area of 1.4 hectare per each household farming, and 99% of agricultural production comes from these smallholders. And having access to markets through these e-commerce solutions, very different kind of applications, is really a good solution for our farmers. And they increase their profit margin through selling this application, which makes like their income increase. And we see the growth of information technologies in Armenia, how positively it affects the agricultural development. And also the educational part is also working really good. Farmers have access to different educational materials for agriculture, and it's like ongoing process, requiring no age limit, no location limit. So it works really good for the agriculture development of Armenia. So within the frames of this RECONOMY program, and our component is called Sustainable Food Systems in Armenia, one of the biggest interventions that we currently implement is that we work with a new portal, with the new established online e-commerce portal in Armenia, the primary objective of which is enhancing business-to-business linkages between smallholder farmers and businesses which use agricultural produce, like HoReCa sectors, traders, exporters, processors of agricultural produce. And this portal, in the first stage, it aims to establish these B2B linkages, and in the later stages, when it gains enough basis of farmers with whom they cooperate, they will also enter B2C, meaning that they will supply agricultural produce to usual consumers from all over Armenia. This is a very interesting model that we believe will work and will be successful, because unfortunately there were like kind of 5-6 kind of similar failed portals in Armenia, and so far we were trying to understand what was the main like drawback of these portals not working properly, and the result was low educational level among Armenian farmers. Like, they are in farming, they do pretty well, but they are not used to using these new technologies. They are not aware of existing applications. And, you know, these failed portals used to collect a certain small amount of farmers, which were not supplying constant quantities and qualities of products, and eventually like they failed. The factor that made us believe that this portal with which we work, and it is called FarmFresh, they have quite large educational program. They go by regions of Armenia and work specifically with youth from those regions, because, you know, the mechanism perfectly works this way. The older generation is working in agriculture. They are the primary producers of the product, but the younger generation, starting even from school ages, who have smartphones and are aware of any kind of technologies, we work with this youth, that you can sell the produce of your household and you can increase the incomes. And you cannot imagine how much this young generation is interested in getting these trainings. So our program finances only the training module of this portal operation, and they have their own co-investment, like they expand the area of the training. So some part of the trainings is being done by the cost of the FarmFresh, and a small portion is being done by the financing of SIDA-funded RECONOMY project. So we believe that the only way of having successful penetration of ICT into agriculture for a country like Armenia, which has fragmented production and mainly older generation is engaged in agricultural production, is working with youth and having large educational component, which introduced what are the benefits of the online marketing and overall ICT technologies. And this is the way we work through this intervention.
Thank you, Sona. And before coming back to you again, in the frames of RECONOMY, Asif, you're working on improving the waste management system in North Macedonia and aiming at expanding regionally in the Western Balkans. Can you kind of walk us through what have you been doing so far? What is Radar Recycling doing?
Thank you, Samin, for the question. Well, Radar Recycling is actually registered as a regular company, even though it has the business model of social enterprise. It is established by the Association of Rome Entrepreneurship Development Initiative. And unfortunately, because we don't have the legislation for social enterprises in North Macedonia, we couldn't register as a social enterprise. Still, we started to work with the informal waste collectors. I can maybe just give a short overview of the situation in North Macedonia regarding the waste management and regarding the informal waste collectors. So within decades in North Macedonia, we have informal waste collectors that are collecting waste materials such plastic, paper, and aluminium from streets and from containers, and they are selling them to another warehouse just to get revenues to their families. And they are not included and involved in the society, neither in the waste management law. And for the time that this process is existing, actually they are doing and they're contributing to the environment, even though they are not visible like a group who is contributing. And regarding the separation of waste, if the informal waste collectors wouldn't be present, there would be not even the possibility to separate the waste from plastic and paper. So if I come back now, what is Radar Recycling? It is a social enterprise that is aiming to organize and to formalize these informal waste collectors while establishing a system for primary waste separation. What does it mean to have a system for primary waste separation? It means that we are placing our waste bins inside the buildings and inside the companies, So our collectors that are employed, they are placing, and after that they are collecting the waste materials and transporting to the warehouse that is in partnership with us. This is how the company is generating the incomes. And how do we see actually the whole process, how it will go on? It is much higher within the vision. The vision is to create a recycling center and to engage more people into the green jobs, because these people are really impactful and they're contributing for the green economy, even though they are not aware for it. But also the society doesn't look on them like this. Within years, they were just presenting them as the ones who are doing the mess, who are with a low dignity, and the ones who are actually contributing for a pollution, which is definitely the opposite of it. So the majority of the informal waste collectors are coming from the rural community, and this is how we started to support them. And personally, it affected me very, very much to start and to look for a long-term solution, not only to have a short-term solution for them. This is how we started, and we developed the process of implementation in 3 phases. The first one is the collection and transport of non-hazardous waste, which is plastic and paper. The second phase is as an added value to the collected materials. We are planning to establish the ready recycling warehouse, which will enable us to store and to do the further treatment for recycling. And the third phase is actually the vision that we plan. It is creating of the recycling center, but also using the opportunities of repairing, upcycling the waste materials, and for sure recycling them and expanding the network of buildings that we have. So far, we have quite 400 and more applicants for our services, and they are willing to separate the waste materials, which we are changing the habits of the people to use the secondary raw materials as a resource and not as a waste. But also we are trying to change the habits and the routine of the informal waste collectors. So far, they are not collecting on the streets and on containers, but they have really fancy electric tricycles, I would say. Maybe something you can show pictures after. And these people are really with the full motivation, with paid contributions. They have the health insurance, but also the pension insurance that just gives them the full incentive to work in a company, because they didn't have the opportunity, but also this is something new for them, and this is how we are changing their narrative and changing their habits.
Thank you very much, Asif. Are you looking at determining ways in which a digital application could link the households and businesses with the waste collectors? Are you aiming at a digital transition in the next phase of your activities?
Well, definitely it will facilitate our work. So what we are managing now is everything with paper and everything with direct meetings with the collectors. But in the future, we are planning to digitalize the whole activity of the informal waste collectors. It means that they will have a more accessible approach to the buildings, but also people can easily contact us. So the digitalization is actually part of our strategy, and in a very short time we are planning to start with digitalizing the recycling, building a platform, then facilitating the collectors' work via artificial intelligence to give them the schedule of buildings that they need to visit. But also we are trying to set up an innovation of designing a smart waste bin that could easily just identify, is it a PET plastic or is it LDP plastic, and is it recyclable or it is not.
Back to you, Sona. I wanted to ask, what's the case that the platform you mentioned earlier will be sustainable? Like, what's the role of organizations like CARD in making ICTs part of the system?
Well, first about the sustainability of platform is that if the farmer does not use the platform, how the sales usually happens in Armenia, there are many middlemen which collect agricultural produce from farmers with quite low prices. And the product end up in markets or at processing plant at quite high margin at the top. So the middlemen the middlemen do not do any hard work, but they gain the highest margin in agricultural produce. While in comparison, if they start to work through online sales, their profit margin increases from about 10% to 70%. And they, of course, pay a certain margin to the maintenance of the portal of this Farm Fresh, which is the kind of a membership fee for being this portal member. But even after the payment of this margin, the remaining margin is still bigger than 10% than they used to have while not using the online portal. So this is approved like financial incentive for the portal. And through this educational component, they also show the calculations on business planning, because many farmers do not even keep record keeping on whether they are working on profit or on loss. So during this educational program, they also show that, you know, if you start to work with us, we eliminate the middlemen, which take the highest margin, and you will earn more even after paying our fees. And the financial sustainability is one of the strongest ones, making us believe that the portal will still be able to self-finance and operate. And they will, they have lots of like activities, educational activities, except these, and they will redirect these funds through, for expanding their farmer bases, and also having more educational programs like agronomical trainings, veterinarian trainings uploaded in their portal, so that member farmers can upgrade their knowledge and information. This is related to their own like business sustainability factor. What we do as CARD through different projects, and we have many ongoing projects now, and we have applied to more of them. Luckily, and gladly, I will mention that many donors have started to pay attention to ICT and include targets for project implementation, like not only ICT, but also digital agriculture and many like similar aspects of agriculture. And through different projects, we also try to enhance the linkages of these ICT technology providers and the agricultural sector. We work largely also with IT sector, and you know, Armenia is gradually becoming a hub where many agricultural related IT solutions are being produced. In many cases, unfortunately, still not applied in Armenia, because the agricultural sector is very small in Armenia and farmers do not have that purchasing power to implement those IT solutions. But Armenian IT specialists sell this solution worldwide with quite high demand and high prices. And the success case of Armenia is that all the pilots of these IT solutions are being implemented in Armenia. So Armenia kind of benefits free of charge from these IT companies operating in Armenia, serving as a pilot area to kind of test all the solutions. And this Farm Fresh is actually one of them. It's they put lots of effort. They have like angel investors from USA, and they are interested to fine-tune this product as a final product and sell it worldwide. And they put lots of effort to make it successful in Armenia. And after having it, they will like stay in Armenia, but afterwards they will also be able to sell this model outside the Armenia. So as what CARD, to answer your question, what we do as CARD, we try to convince donor organizations and therefore it's towards ICT, introduction to agricultural sector, and also towards linking this huge IT blooming sector to agricultural sector, to bring those solutions to Armenia and to make Armenian farmers benefit from this mind power that we have inside Armenia.
Thank you very much, Sona. Coming back to you, Nandini. While ICTs have led to substantial improvements in productivity and transforming value chains, these digital technologies have also created new barriers to entry, right? So only those individuals with the requisite skills and those enterprises with access to the right tools can reap benefits from the digital revolution. So how do we make sure that ICTs don't lead to inequality and exclusion? For example, even before the COVID-19 outbreak, there were already persistent differences in access between women and men, urban versus rural sectors, and so on. How do we make sure that the SDG targets of universal access to ICTs are met?
Great question. I want to take a moment to appreciate Sona and Armenia, one of my favorite countries. And I want to emphasize something that Sona said, that, you know, Armenia has been starting to grow this amazing startup culture and a huge tech industry that's doing really amazing work and really interesting work. And I also just really appreciate Armenian food, some of the best vegetarian food in the world. And I also want to appreciate Asib and Macedonia. I think Macedonia also has incredibly hospitable people. I've had the actual fortune to visit both Armenia and Macedonia in my career. And I think the work that both of you are doing is amazing and really, really important. So I just want to appreciate you both for that. Such a great question, Sabine. In terms of you know, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, to achieve universal access, I think we actually have to up the game. What do I mean by that? We talk about universal access to phones, universal access to energy, universal access to internet. Yes, that's super important, right? But I actually think, and this goes back to something Asib was saying, this goes back to something Sona was saying, we actually need to have marginalized communities, women, people from rural areas, people who normally haven't been participating in the economy nor the digital economy, actually to be helping to build the digital economy. That should be, I think, our goal as people who are trying to elevate and improve the quality of people's lives in the countries that we work in. And it's a big lift, right? I don't pretend to say it's an easy job for any of us, right? It's beyond the interventions to get more people phones, right? Which are difficult in and of themselves if you're trying to do them in a sustainable way. It's or access to energy, right? Or access to internet. It's often also working to transition people's perception of women or other marginalized populations right to digital equity, right? I mean, you know, we can discuss whether or not this is the case in some of the communities that RECONOMY supports, but many people don't think women should have access to a phone, a mobile phone. Many people don't think women should have access to a bank account. You know, your job is to take care of the house. Why do you need access to these things? It's a very common refrain in a lot of places in a lot of the world, right? And in many households, it's the husband that gets the first phone, it's the son that gets the second phone, and if we're lucky, it's the wife that gets the third phone, if there is a third phone, right? So when we talk about, you know, first step universal access, but maybe the ambition being marginalized populations actually building digital economies alongside others, it's much more than sort of basic interventions that you hear about, right? All of those interventions, the barriers you're battling have the foundations of these social and cultural norms, right? And that's really challenging. How do you deal with that? First, you have to diagnose it, and then you have to deal with it very carefully, right? And so I think, you know, there's 5 pillars to addressing marginalized access, right? First is reducing the digital divide, and that means access to phones, that means skills, right? We've talked about that with my colleagues as well. You know, it talks about addressing some of the cultural and social norms. The second one is really increasing the number of digital and financial products that are affordable, right? It goes back to the thing that I said earlier, affordable business models are what's transformative for low-income people. So we need to increase the number of affordable digital and financial products. One of the pillars of RECONOMY is also addressing policy and regulations. And so absolutely, how do you leverage data? How do you leverage policy to improve the lives of marginalized people? And even address some of those social and cultural norms, because sometimes they're in the laws in the countries that we work in, right? How do we now, MSMEs, both Sona and Asib have talked about micro and small and medium enterprises and how important they are for the value chains that they work on, right? Every country, actually MSMEs are the heartbeat of the economy. How do you leverage tech to improve their business models, make cost of business lower, give them more access to markets, right? How do you use technology to improve those? And the last being really increasing the number of marginalized people in the digital economy labor force, right? How do you work to do that? How do you get commitments to it to do it? How do you increase their skills to the level where they can actually do it? And the last framework that I'd want to share that I think is particularly relevant to this audience in the RECONOMY is the Digital Economy Society Index. This is something that the EU has put forward. They've been doing it for some time now. I want to say since 2014, where every year they are measuring how strong a digital economy is across multiple EU countries. And given that a lot of the RECONOMY countries are in Eastern Europe and, have close relationships with the EU, they measure across four levels. One is human capital, right? Building skills. Do they have the skills to use ICTs to improve their livelihoods? Second is connectivity. Is there connectivity? Do people have access to internet? How strong is the access to internet? Are they using the access to internet? Third is integration of digital technology. Is digital technology being integrated into business models, into everyday life? And lastly is digital public services. That's incredibly important. We've seen not just in the EU, but across the world, several entities like the Better Than Cash Alliance and others have really focused on trying to help governments integrate digital financial services and digital services into government, which has significantly improved access to financial services and other government services to people who normally didn't have access to them. So I think these are four really important key areas, Sabine, if we're looking at how are we using technology to significantly improve the lives of people, towards this goal of the SDGs or even more.
Nandini, thank you very much. Actually, the pillar you mentioned on policy and regulations, back to you, Sona. How are you going to facilitate policy improvements to involve food system innovators in Armenia?
We are actually in the process of starting a research study to identify the gaps in the regulatory framework. And based on the results that come out from the analysis of regulatory framework, we will propose policy recommendations, and we will do a validation workshop, to inform all the stakeholders on what to do and how to act, to enhance better environment and opportunities for national and international innovators to enter to the agriculture of Armenia and start to propose solutions for our agricultural production as well.
Asif, back to you now. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many individual sellers and entrepreneurs from the Roma communities in the Western Balkans that depended on physical markets have lost their source of income. And many of them don't have the skills or the resources to shift to digital solutions, such as e-commerce platforms. How are you going to go about supporting them through digitalization?
Unfortunately, a very small number of entrepreneurs could join the e-commerce platforms because most of the enterprises, they are not legal entities or legal businesses, they are working informally. But on their interest, actually, we started to create a program which is called Roma Digital Boost. And we started to do a diagnostic sheet with them to see what are their needs. And based on the needs, we started to build their capacities and to start opening them and create Facebook pages, Instagram pages, at least just to show them how the online selling is working on. So we had a good activity with them, brand identity, which was meaningful for them to create the logo of their business and to start thinking on a way of the online tools, how they should be used. So after the capacity building and the trainings, I could say that most of them had already the online business on their hands. They started to work and to sell their products through Facebook and through Instagram, which is very trending now. But we are also thinking now to develop the platform and to give them the opportunity to start selling on a online platform, so to upload their products and to start selling. But it was very difficult and challenging for them actually to get used to the online selling, because so far they were used to a direct selling approach, and it was very challenging for them to use the online tools. But after that, also to see how they should expand the network of clients or what the clients actually really need. But they are overcoming it, and I think that in the future they will do much better, because Ready is just improving now the program, and we are developing very good activities within it and tools for digitalizing the businesses there.
Thank you, Asif. So we're nearing the end of our discussion. I just wanted to ask before we close, do you have any last closing statements?
Well, I mean, I just think that Sona and Asib have so nicely illustrated some of the successes and challenges of this space, right? Sona talking about the experience she's had, digitizing an agricultural value chain and the impact, right, on the end customer, the client, not customer, and it reducing the cost, right? And the middleman piece is like a classic digital agriculture story, right? Because it's that tricky middleman or woman that was really reducing the profit to the farmer, and that's kind of what we were always trying to figure out. How do we address that challenge, right? I think Asib talking about the challenges of getting onto an e-commerce platform, especially for marginalized populations, is so relevant. E-commerce platforms are all the rage now, and I think people feel like, oh, it's the solution for all problems. It brings buyers and sellers together in one place in a very organized way, and it's so easy. But it's not that easy. It takes time to recruit. It takes time to train. It takes time to really know how to onboard people who traditionally haven't used these tools. But I do, and maybe I'm just a believer, but I believe in the promise, right? I have studied and worked with 12 e-commerce companies across Asia, many of which are homegrown, right? We're not talking about the Amazons of the world, right? We're talking about very homegrown e-commerce companies, and they are targeting marginalized populations. And while it takes time to get started and get people on board, they are seeing an improvement in people's lives and improvement in business models. And so I'm hopeful that with the leadership of our colleagues like Sona and Asib and others, that the tools of ICT and digital can be used to really improve the lives of people in the economies that we work in. So I'm just really appreciative of hearing their stories.
Yeah, thank you, Sabine, for organizing the podcast videos. Definitely, this was a very interesting episode where I could hear different stories about different sectors. I think that we all have challenges that we are overcoming, and it's good when we are sharing them, so we can really just share our experience with it. I would like to thank Sona, but also I saw that here the name is Nandini, but definitely I would really like to meet you in person, both of you, so we can share our experience and also brainstorm new ideas. Thank you, Sabine, for organizing this episode.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you that we don't perceive ICT as something perk or benefit. The pace of life is so quick now that the customer preferences urge farmers to shift to e-commerce. If I talk from the aspect of e-commerce from ICT, yeah, and farmers in long term do not really have any alternative from shifting, because people do not have time to go to supermarkets, to markets, to make shopping, and everyone tries to order it online, and they look for consistent quantities and qualities supply. So this is something that time will lead us to reach to this condition when everyone sells online, and the sooner we start to prepare our agriculture sector and our farmers to this transition, the better it is for us. And also I would like to flash back to COVID case. In case of Armenia, COVID was a really, really good boost for e-commerce flourishing in Armenia, because, you know, even the farmers, small farmers who don't have phone, we have a case when a 13-year-old boy from one community was collecting all the agricultural produce from his community and was selling online, and he was like creating his own margin from this. He was another middleman, but using these e-commerce opportunities. And we don't really look this strict that each person has to have its own phone, its own channel, web page, whatever. The channels of working are very different depending on person. And we see this as future of the agriculture, and we work really hard to bring as many farmers to this style of working as soon as possible, because time goes fast, and consumers are requiring this transition, because no one has time to go to markets to select. They even make personal connections with farmers, and they become friends. So there's very many different developments.
Sona, Nandini, and Asif, thank you so much for being part of episode 24 to discuss how can we make ICTs work for development. The use of ICT as a powerful tool for economic growth is a step on the way to increasing economic growth, which is one of the prerequisites for poverty reduction. But we need to make sure that the SDG targets of universal access to ICTs are met. For the viewers and listeners out there, we have interesting topics coming up, so stay tuned.